Explain to me why. I don't read that many middle grades outside of middle grade March. And nowadays I really don't read that many historicals that don't have some kind of fantasy element to them. And yet you give me a historical middle grade mystery and I will eat it up. In this video, I'm going to share with you what I've been reading for middle grade March. Middle grade March is hosted by Krista, Katie and Amanda, and I'm going to link to all of them and the announcement video in the description below. This round of the readathon has 5 optional prompts, and I think I'm going to hit most of them in this video, but we'll see how we get on. As a sort of additional challenge for myself, but because it fits really well with some of the other readathons I'm doing this month, and again, check out my TBR video if you want to know more about those, I'm going to be really focusing on middle grade mysteries. I have at least 4 in mind from my TBR, and I'd really like to get to all of them before the end of the month. I decided to pick up a box full of murders first, just because I'm really looking forward to the format of this one, so I thought I should go with it. This is Janice Hallett. I've read her adult books in the past. I think this is her first middle grade, and I wasn't sure whether she was going to stick with that quirky formatting she has in all her adult novels or just write this as a normal novel. Her style is basically that she uses mixed media, the book equivalent of found footage. We get email samples, we get text messages, there are maybe newspaper snippets, sometimes transcripts, sometimes there's flyers. In the appeal, it was about a theatre show, we got to see some of the promotional material that went out. This is focusing on Ava and Luke. They are brother and sister, but they're currently living in separate households. Ava's living with her mum, Luke's living with his dad. Luke goes up into their attic and he finds a box full of old papers from the way back 1980s. We then follow the book sort of in a combination of text message and diary entries, occasional newspaper snippets, as Luke photographs each of the things he finds and he and Ava discuss them. The documents are to do with this summer camp and a few different mysteries that are happening there. Some of them are bigger than others. We have some rooms being mistaken for a buried body by one of the camp counselors. We have a camper who has lost a pocket knife, but we also have the police turning up because an actual dead body has been found at a cabin nearby. And all of this is under the kind of umbrella where this is the last summer the camp will be open because a waste disposal company has just bought the land. I'm not sure about suspects because I think it unlikely that any of the children we're hearing from will be the actual killers. So I guess it's the adults that we're really looking at in terms of potential killers. So because of the nature of it, like Hallett's adult books, this one is very fast paced. It's very easy to breeze through. A lot of these pages have very few words actually written on them. So it does kind of keep up the pace. It does make the book go by quickly, which makes sense because this is a 420 page book, which I was really surprised by for it being a middle grade mystery. That seems on the excessive side, but it does make sense when you think about the fact that there are entire pages with a couple of text messages on them. You probably do need more space to play out the story. If this was just told in normal prose, then you probably could cut it down a fair bit, so it's probably not a great comparison. The first things I've noticed about this being different from Hallett's previous adult books is that it feels slightly less jarring, slightly more guidance as you go through the different sources, which makes complete sense for middle grade, and I'm really glad she does that. In her adult books, I noticed, or at least in me as a reader, there was a tendency to throw you into the deep end. You were immediately introduced to really, really big casts of characters. You were thrown into the middle of conversations and disputes and just really expected to keep up. I remember in the appeal, we did have a pair of lawyers that were discussing the evidence they were finding. They only popped in very rarely to discuss their theories, whereas Luke and Ava are talking to us after almost every source and compiling the evidence for the reader a little bit in case they've missed something. Although we have those text messages from Luke and Ava, the sources that are coming from the actual investigation tend towards these longer incident reports or diaries that each of the groups within the camp is being required to keep for each day. So we're getting fairly long sources. They're at least a couple of pages. They're written in basically prose. It makes it, I think, a little easier to follow along with what's happening than the out of context emails or the disjointed segments from text message conversations that Hallett puts in her adult books. It's still the same idea, but this just feels like a slightly easier way to do it because you're getting more information given to you, laid out, rather than some of her adult things you really had to just hope that it all came together in the end. I'm really enjoying the kind of 80s camp setting. I don't know how much I'm loving the phone booths and Walkmans being referred to as ancient technology, but it definitely feels in keeping. The fact that Ava and Luke can see something and immediately then you get a snapshot of Ava having Googled it, the description for words from the 80s or something related to the case, they're able to quickly look it up on their phones, whereas the campers are obviously having to put in a bit more work if they want to find something out. So it's interesting to see the difference between the two sets of similarly aged children, but 4 years apart. At the moment, I don't have any clues about why the murders have happened, who has been murdering them, what's the mystery. I suspect it's something to do with the pollution angle, but I can't really put it together in my head yet. We also have a kind of secondary mystery going on, who the children in this camp are and why Luke and Ava's dad has all of these documents. Ava is wondering whether or not one of the lead campers, Ricky, might be their dad, but we've not really seen any real evidence for that. So finding out how this case ties into Ava and Luke will also be interesting. This was a lot of fun. I do think, on reflection, that the 400 plus page count is more than it needs. I thought that maybe the way the story's told might, eat up pages, and maybe this would feel like a shorter book than it is. And because those pages are sometimes half empty, it does feel like you're getting through it fairly fast. But especially towards the end, I really felt the book begin to drag. Maybe that's not just because of the page count, maybe it's not just because of the way the story's told through these documents. It might also be the fact that there's a kind of reveal, but with very Lord of the Rings ending where it just kept going. And again, that just made it feel that we could have taken 50, 100 even pages off this book, and I would still think that was not crazy short for a middle grade. Especially a middle grade that doesn't have any fantasy elements, there's no real world building. Hallett has come from adult books, she's maybe leaning longer, I don't know. I did think she did a great job of translating her style of adult writing to a middle grade for this. It kept that found documents feel, but it gave you a little more guidance in that there was more prose told through those documents rather than purely being email and text extracts. And there were those little moments in between where Ava and Luke stopped and assessed where they were using a report form, and that gave, I think, the reader a chance to check that they were keeping up with the clues they were supposed to have spotted. Overall, I thought it was a really good middle grade mystery, and I didn't think that I would be particularly bothered about continuing the series. When I finished this one, I decided that I'm probably gonna stick to Hallett's adult books in future because those I have really enjoyed. The second book is something like Murder at the Museum, and if I was on the fence, a museum setting is definitely gonna tip me over. For my own next book in this vlog, I'm picking up The Last Chance Hotel by Nikki Thornton. This one is a little bit more of a fantasy. The cover definitely gave me slightly eerie, not maybe horror, but spooky vibes. The American cover is very different, and I don't think it has the same vibe as this one. It looks more like something you might see on one of the Nevermore books, so I wasn't quite sure where the vibe was gonna sit. This one follows Seth, who is an orphan kitchen boy in a hotel that is in the middle of a basically isolated abandoned woods. He's really never been outside of these woods in his life. There's a very Cinderella feel to his story where the manager and manageress of the hotel and their daughter look down on him. They make him do all the pot scrubbing, all the rough jobs, while the chef in charge of the kitchen is a little bit a little bit lazy, a little bit negligent. Seth is the one that is doing all of the kitchen boy jobs, but he's also actually a brilliant chef like his father, and he's actually the one doing all the cooking for the hotel. The story starts when the hotel is suspiciously fully booked with a party of really random and strange people. They all have kind of magician type qualities in the sense of being illusionists. But when there's a murder, Seth begins to investigate a little bit more, and it turns out that the magical world is a real thing too. And this has been a conference to interview potential magic havers and possibly allow them to be indoctrinated into the fully fledged magical world. So we're sitting somewhere between, I guess, something like Harry Potter and Nevermore. And it's okay so far. I'm not loving it. I'm not hating it. I'm kind of a little bit on the fence still. I picked this one from my TBR Tailspin this month. I got a random emoji pick and I got bread. So I thought this one fitted really well because Seth is a kitchen boy, he does some baking, and the hotel proprietors that are, you know, his unloving adoptive family are both called Bun. That's their surname, so bread seemed, leave me alone, it's fine. At the moment, I'm, I think, about a third of the way through, and like I said, it's not grabbing me, but it is also reading really quickly, and because this one is round about where I think a middle grade should be. This one is about the 300 mark page-wise, and because it's moving so quickly, I did flirt with the idea of DNFing it just before I kind of started this, because I was thinking that I'm not super invested and maybe I should drop it and focus on something else this month. But I think I'm invested enough that I want to finish it, even if it does end up being kind of middling. And it was one that was recommended to me on Blue Sky when I asked about some books with this kind of vibe to them. So I do want to stick with it at the moment. And admittedly, I'm not even halfway through, but at the moment, I don't see myself continuing this series, but I'm still hoping that the book itself might win me over enough that it gets a 3 or 4 star. Okay, so I didn't have the greatest time with The Last Chance Hotel. There was nothing wrong with it. It just didn't grab me the way I wanted it to. I think this would be a perfectly acceptable mystery with a really nice magical element for an actual middle grade reader. But something about it just lacked that spark that carries a book from a middle grade for a middle grade audience to a middle grade that adults can enjoy too. Something just wasn't there that I wanted. I think maybe because the magical community that's in it feels kind of underutilized. We don't get to see Seth really become part of that magical community in this book. And I think maybe if we had, it might have been more compelling. I'm thinking of the way in Nevermore, which I'm going to be reading the 4th book for that later. But in that book, we get to see Morrigan go to Nevermore and become part of the magical community. I just think it would have been better maybe if after the murder, after a little bit in the hotel, Seth had become more part of that magical community and we'd seen more of it. I'm not going to be continuing the series, and I'm probably going to be rating this somewhere around the 3 to 3.5 mark. The next book I picked up though was a resounding success, so much so that I didn't even check in with you guys. I'm just going to talk about it now. This is The Body Under the Piano, Aggie Morton Mystery Queen Mystery by Martha Jocelyn, I think. It is a historical mystery in 1903, so the Edwardian era, and it features as our sleuths Aggie and her friend Hector. So Aggie Morton is, and it's in the author's summary at the back, she's basically the author's fictionalized ideal of what a young Agatha Christie might have been like if she had stumbled onto various murders and adventures. And then her best friend slash crime fighting sleuth partner is Hector Perot, who's very clearly a young version of Hercule Poirot. He's a Belgian immigrant who's come to stay in Torquay where Aggie lives. They find a body in Aggie's dance class. It's the sister-in-law of her dance teacher, And so Aggie gets caught up because she finds the body and because she wants to prove her beloved dance teacher is innocent. It was a lot of fun. I really loved the setting. I really loved the characters. The author's done a great job of nudges and winks to Agatha Christie novels, especially obviously those two protagonists. But I don't think it feels like you have to know anything about Agatha Christie's life or have read any of her novels to have a great time with it. Considering it's a middle grade, she also puts in some really nice little asides to social issues that Aggie comes across. Obviously we have the issue of immigrants and the way they are treated in a community through Hector's eyes, but we also have some looking at gender roles in the way that Aggie is expected to behave, but also through some of the other female characters who really get to see the spectrum of femininity. Different women performing femininity in different ways and means, and not just on like a one directional sliding scale of very feminine to tomboy. We really get to see different women in this time period and how they kind of carve their own type of femininity out in the world, how they either use it or subvert it to achieve their goals and live the lives they want to live. We're also looking here at some issues around, I guess, respectability politics, children out of wedlock, your standing in the community. All of that kind of filters together and plays a part in the story in a way that I just thought was really well done. It didn't feel like it was hammering you over the head with it. It didn't feel like it was, you know, making a point. But on reflection, all of that was in there as Aggie and Hector are running about trying to uncover the mystery. I thought Aggie had a nice balance in terms of sleuthing. She was looking for clues, but she wasn't doing it to the point where you feel like sometimes sleuths are being ridiculously risk-taking, making silly choices. Obviously, as the book ramps towards the conclusion, we get a little bit more dramatic. It's a middle grade. We are going to have a lot more fun and a lot more adventure right in there at the end. But I really enjoyed her as a protagonist and I'm really excited to read more from this series. As far as I can tell, it taps out at book 4, so it's just a finished quartet. The second book looks like we're going to go off to a more remote house and spend kind of the Christmas holidays there with Aggie, Hector and her big sister. And I think that could be a lot of fun. I might keep it for the Christmas period, but I also kind of really want to read it now, so I might end up reading it before then. This was a 5-star read for me. I really enjoyed it. I'm about, I think, a quarter of the way through Silverborn and I'm having a good time with it. It did take me a while to get back into the Nevermore world, and I maybe should have, in fact I definitely, let's be honest, I definitely should have read some kind of summary or review of the original 3 books, or the past 3 books, because I read them all together, so I just kind of think of them as one story in my head, and I read them so long ago that I don't really remember much of that story. So starting this one off, I did feel a little bit confused. There are a lot of characters, there's been a lot of events leading up to this point, and I maybe wasn't as prepared to be invested as I could have been. That said, I'm enjoying where I am. I'm kind of getting back to grips with Morrigan, with the hotel, with Jupiter, with the other kind of kids in her class. This one, it does feel like it has a darker angle than some of the Nevermore books in the past. I think Nevermore as a series in general is quite a dark version of the magical school trope. In this one, we start off right from the start, set up in the past books where she has this unusual and unique power of being a wondersmith, and the only wondersmiths in recent memory have been essentially, you know, Dark Lord type characters. The populace isn't keen on having her around. They really want to send her away back to where she came from, which feels quite on point. It feels quite interesting. I feel like maybe Jessica Townsend is doing something with that. In her previous book, she had, what was it, Hollowpox, which again felt very on the nose at the time. I think maybe this is doing the same. It is a really big book for a middle grade. It's something like 600 and something pages, which I'm sorry, but maybe you get away with it because this is the 4th book in a series, but 650 pages is a big book for an adult book. I don't really see how this is hitting that middle grade market. It feels like this is only for very, very, very confident middle grade readers or for adults who like to read middle grade. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are loads of young readers who were fully invested in the first 3 Nevermore books who are now maybe a little bit older and ready to tackle something a bit chunkier. But I just feel like it's a really long book for most readers, let alone for kids. I feel like with middle grade, the plot should be fairly pacey, and I just don't really see how you're gonna have something that feels pacey, that feels like it flows from one thing to next without getting too convoluted and fill that page count. I just have a feeling that the pacing's gonna feel really off in this one, but we'll see how it goes. Silverborn took me a little bit longer to really get into than I had thought it would or expected it to, but I think this is just because it's been so long since I read Hollowpox, and when I read that, I had just read the first 2 books, so it felt like a more organic experience, whereas this one I had to get to know the characters and the world and refresh myself a little bit in the events of Hollowpox because that book had so much plot going on. Silverborn does have a lot of plot. It is a big middle grade, but I think that because most of the plot is more to do with Morrigan finding her mother's family, finding a new family for herself, and some of the internal politics of these Silverborn households, these elite districts and families, their political influence, it all feels a lot closer to home. It all feels quite character driven. These are very much issues that are directly to do with Morrigan rather than the magical world in general, and I think that really helped bringing me back into that world because I didn't really need to remember too many details of the overarching plot. I could just dive back into Morrigan's side of the story and then be reminded of bigger plot elements as we went along. So I did get back into it and I did have a great time. I really liked that this one was so specifically about Morrigan. She's such a fun character and I love spending time in her head. It was nice to get that background to her family, to flesh out the world, but in ways that are directly related to Morrigan. We learn more about the society in general. We learn more about the history, about how Jupiter ties into Morrigan's past, about how her Crow family tie into the Nevermore world. We get a lot more backstory, but it's all done through this really direct connection of Morrigan finding her mother's family, which I really enjoyed. I really hated but loved, but hated seeing Morrigan and Jupiter's relationship in this book. Obviously Morrigan is a teenager now, she's pushing boundaries, she's trying things that she thinks are right or correct, even when that goes against what she's being told by the adults in her life. And vice versa, Jupiter is having to learn to deal with a slightly older Morrigan. He's having to learn that she might not just do exactly as she's told. The world that she's in now, this magical world, isn't as new to her as it once was, and she is making her own decisions within that construct in a way that she perhaps didn't in the earlier books. All of that leads to this really nice kind of familial tension that gives the book, I think, an element of relatability. Yes, Morrigan's family situation is rather unusual. Yes, there are no wondersmiths in our world, but that awkward relationship between her and Jupiter, where he's her guardian but not her parent, but he's been her guardian for so long, there's definitely a parental love between the two of them. He is involved in her education. It's a complex relationship that's challenging as you get older with the adults in your life. I think that part feels very relatable and gives you that connection and that kind of in to Morrigan's experience in this book. It was really heartbreaking to see them fighting, to see some of the things that Morrigan felt and then also said to Jupiter and vice versa, but it was really compelling. I do think Silverborn was perhaps a little long in the tooth. I know that we are now up in book 4, but 500 to 600 pages I still think is just too long for a middle grade novel, and I don't think this one needed it. I think there were ways to trim this down. The core element being that family conflict, and there's a bit of a murder mystery going on, but a lot of the plot to me felt like it could have been streamlined. Overall, that was a great ride and it really did get me back into the Nevermore world. I waited so long to read this one and then I forgot about it when it did come out that I really honestly wasn't sure. I thought I would give it a try and if I didn't like it I would just kind of ditch the series. But I think now I'm fully invested again and hopefully I'll get to the next book when it comes out sooner than I got to this one and I'll be excited to continue with the series. Overall, I've had a great middle grade March so far. I definitely think that the star has been that Aggie Morton book and I'm really excited to continue with that series. Just because it was new to me, it feels like maybe more of a success than Silverborn, although that one has kind of reinvigorated a love for a series that I was a little sad I had lost steam on. So both of those are definitely high points. A Box Full of Murder was an enjoyable read, but I probably wouldn't continue with the series except for the fact that the next book really appeals to me. And then The Last Chance Hotel was probably my least favourite of the books. It was fine and I think it's one that would appeal to middle grade readers. It just didn't have what it takes for me personally to bridge that middle grade adult divide. I hope that maybe you've found a new book or a new series that you might be interested in picking up. Let me know which middle grade books, if any, you are reading this month or that you have on your TBR in general. And if you're not, just leave me some kind of toy emoji. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.